Nancy Grace, I'm here at the Y. After the tax season on the 18th, I went to Minute Clinic because my throat was corrupted. I mean, it was horrible. The tonsil thing hanging, I thought, oh my God. And the dentist had already mentioned something. But during the 3 months of doing taxes, I would wear a mask every day, all day long. I said, well, I don't want to catch anything, but not realizing I was encapsulating all my air and everything, my lungs. And I was sucking on candy like lemon drops and mints and Warthen's Own. And that was sugary. So you're sitting there all day. There's no breaks. You're eating crazy food like peanut butter crackers and stuff. It was horrible. You really do client after client. We did 1,001 returns and 1,001 reviews. That's exactly the number going back to 18, 20, 21, 19, 18, and 22, of course. And there were just basically 3 or 4 of us there at any given time. Anyway, that's over. But I'm going to make the video on Bundy pretty soon. I think there's a lot of new details. But it's a horrible feeling to be against the wall. All these psychologists throughout the world, probably 1 million people, have this narrative. And I know there's another point in the narrative, and there may be a male child that's 55 now. All right. Anyway, I mean, it's insane. And the one friend that may know a little something, she doesn't want to get involved. Debbie says, she was in the car with me. She says, don't obsess about something that happened 53 years ago. When she found out, she went bat crazy. Her mother was bipolar, manic depressive, and had she had electric shock therapy. But you know what? One thing about Jean is she was always the officer's wife. And she always, my dad was a chief petty officer, ADC, aircraft. And Mr. Davis, Kathleen's dad, was also like a warrantor, some kind of Navy guy that involved electricity. He was also a chief, maybe even higher than Dad. I don't know. He worked on electronics. So my dad worked on airplanes also all those years. Anyway, Jean made a point to the extent that C1, C2, 3, he was commanding officer. So in my 12-year-old mind, when I got in this car, I didn't want to get in. I said, no, Debbie, no. I was just pretending to hitchhike. It was a summer of love. We were taking summer band, and she had talked to this guy in the red Volkswagen with chrome. It had chrome bumpers. It had what appeared to be a black and white tag. And she was talking to him. He had a mole. He wasn't wearing a shirt. When he went by, and I was ready to give up because I said, oh, Miss Mock's going to see me. We're going to get in big trouble. Because we weren't supposed to hitchhike. I was just pretending. She was acting like a diva. So I said, well, let me go try to catch us a ride, like she was a star or something. So I went across the way and I tried to catch a ride. Not a real ride. But if it had been one of the boys from the neighborhood, I guess it would have been okay. But this red Volkswagen, which was atypical, it was not normal, bright red, crimson almost, like the little nurses back in the day that had the little white outfits and they had like a Red Cross pin. It was that color red. Shiny. Anyway, she's talking to him, and I couldn't hear, and I stayed at the rear end to the passenger side, and she says, get in. And I said, no, Debbie, it's just pretend. We're just pretending. You don't get a car with some man look like he's 20 years old. But I stood for a second, and she's going to get in. And I think I can't just let her go off what appeared to be like a Navy, maybe a Navy officer, what do they call AG, Lieutenant JG, something like that, a young ROTC guy or something. I don't know what he was. He had khaki pants on. Maybe that's why it came in my mind. But I also thought maybe he'd been playing some pickup basketball because there was a basketball hoop among the pine trees. She was sitting in the bleachers, and she's talking to him, and I walk across the street, and she's talking and leaning in, and she was wearing a white peasant top with little eye, the little eye, embroidered little eye holes, and cut off Hager shorts, what do they call them, was frayed. And I had on either one of my brother's Gant shirts or a red, I got a picture of it, a red surfer shirt I got in a Daytona with a little white collar and the bell-bottom pedal pushers my mom had let me fray. They were just pull on. Anyway, she's going to get in. So there's a latch on the seat that made it move forward. So she pushes the latch down, and I get in the back with my little clarinet, and she gets in the front with her flute case, which was longer and narrower, but it was still black imitation leather cases. And I'm in the back, and there was a shirt on the floor a yellow golf shirt with a little ridge. And my dad didn't wear golf shirts. They wore T-shirts from the Navy, but he didn't wear golf shirts, and he wasn't a golfer. He was a mechanic. Anyway, car mechanic and, or, all that. He was a farm boy from Mississippi. And we had a Hudson, and we had these big cars, beautiful cars. Hudson, Bel Air, Chevy 1955, teal and white Bel Air. And anyway, it was a year my brother had a motorcycle. He was 15. I was 12.9. We get in, and I said, there's books back here. And he says, just move the books. And I thought, oh, this guy's just move the books. And so he's going around the baseball grounds, and he came to Lamoille. And then he turned at Lamoille left, and he's facing the cow pasture, which later became a Kmart. The next year in 68 or 69, it became a Kmart. But there was just a cow pasture, belonged to the Towers Hardware people. And he pulled a revolver from somewhere, a really long, silverish revolver. He had narrow arms, narrow wrists with little black whiffs of what I call black hair. And I looked in the rearview mirror, and he had an eyebrow that went completely across his forehead, and his eyes were black. See the windows on the Y, and you see nothing behind them? It's like a building with nothing behind it, like an old church with nobody's there, a Gothic church with black windows, nothing behind it. And they also seemed a little odd, uneven or something. But I'm looking at it, and the eyebrows then, he was looking handsome up till then. He looked like a Rob Lowe. He looked like Rob Lowe. As a matter of fact, his lineup for Carol DeRoche, and also when he fired one of his attorneys, and he's sitting there and has a plaintive look, both of those pictures could be Rob Lowe. That's the way he looked. Maybe 3 or 4 years older than his high school picture, with that kind of haircut. Anyway, I say, what is your name? And he says, Theodore. And as a kid, I said, Theodore? Because that was so pretentious to me. Theodore? And because the kids in our, if you were Gregory, you were Greg. If you were Geraldine, you were Jerry. If you were Walter, you were Walt. Okay? So to say Theodore was just an uncommon name to me. And I said, Theodore? And I said, well, what is your last name? And by then I'd had my case open. I think it was June 5th, 1967. And it must have been like the first day, and we were learning how to assemble the cork pieces and and the only reason I was there is Debbie wanted to do this summer band for some reason. Hurry up with school. And we were entering 8th grade. It was summer. I wasn't all that enthused, but I had seen a Benny Goodman movie. And I said, well, maybe I could learn to play the jazz. I'd be great at it. The only thing I really ever learned was Little Brown Jug. But I didn't stick with it because summer vacation, I cut loose in summer. We used to go to Daytona, Philadelphia, or near Memphis, Ecru, Mississippi, and all the different cousins up there. So that was more interesting to me than learning clarinet. Anyway, whatever. So we're at the corner. He pulled the gun. I said, what is your name? He said, Theodore. And I said, what is your last name? And he said, Bundy. And I said, your name is Bundy like my clarinet, and your gun is silver like Debbie's flute. And Debbie had quit talking. Like her hair was in a ponytail for some reason. She had died at Siena. But anyway, he was tanned. He had khaki shorts on, no shirt, mole or two on his neck. And I said, what is your name? He said, Bundy. And I said, your name is Bundy like my clarinet, and your flute is silver like Debbie. Your gun is silver like Debbie's flute. I said, Debbie's father's an admiral at NASA. Well, I said, Debbie's father's an admiral at NASA. He was a commander. I have looked up now, and I don't know the chain of command of the Navy. I barely know the chain of command of the Army. But apparently, in 1967, there were probably only 6 or 10 admirals in all of the Navy. So if Bundy was smart as he was, that must have thrown him. Even though he had gone into some kind of two-door state, here's a little snotty, rednecky little girl and her friend, and she's talking about Debbie's father's an admiral. And then I said, if you want to meet girls, you ought to go up to the high school. It's just a few blocks away. Oh, you ought to meet Vicky and Jeannie. They're so pretty, and they're Debbie's sister. They're already out on their own. And all I want from this is, 1, substantiation that it was him. And 2, I would like to know, did he come to and from Jacksonville on occasion? There's a few more things. There's a lot of things. It's going to take 2 to 3 hours to get this all put out. Bonnie, who was a ballerina in Tallahassee, the only other person from Jacksonville. and even toured in Europe, knows a little bit about it also. And she's going to be willing to do an interview about the time in Tallahassee during that. She was also a part-time police dispatcher, and she believes me. And I guess Kathleen believes me too, but I don't know. But she don't want to get involved. She says it's scandalous or something. And, you know, but I mean, can you imagine, Miss Grace, how hard is to be, and I have a criminal justice degree, and you said, well, you were downtown. I never knew it. I never knew it in 75. And there's reasons for that too, because I was working shift work. My parents watched, you know, remember the news would come on, it would be the local news, and then they'd give you a blip of the national news. Well, if I was working 3 to 11 and I was getting an apartment ready for myself, I didn't even take the newspaper, because I first got my first apartment in Ortega and then on Palm Avenue and stuff during JSO. So in San Marco, I mean, I had other things on my mind than let's get the newspaper. You know, I may have picked some up every time. So if there was a blip about somebody named Ted in the Northwest in 75, I never knew it. And you said, well, what about the officers with the homicide division? They must have heard about it. But if they did, they went back up to the 4th and 5th floor, and I was a newbie. I only came on in May. So if something happened in August or September, we did 3 to 11, 11 to 7, and 7 to 3. If there had been a blip on the national news, I never knew about it. I never knew about it till 78 in February, when I ran down to Kathleen's mom and said, look at this news. This is the guy we rode with all those years ago. And I said, that's him. That's his name. But I never knew Ted was Theodore. Okay, you see my problem? And I know that Debbie knows more, because there would not be this resistance to kids doing something a little bit wrong in the summer of love. Why this brick wall of resistance? I think her husband's father was a teamster. Debbie got married to a Louis Vitale, Palm Coast. Her name is now Vitale. She got married and met him in Gainesville, and he had come from New York City. His father was the president of the local Teamsters Union, okay? He was born in 51, 52, like my brother, and he passed recently. Well, despite everything you say, there are secrets. And if he was good at secrets, then he's not going to want to tell that his wife had once had an association with Theodore Bundy, or her sisters. Jeannie became pregnant. And there's even Dale Carson is involved in this in a way, because his mother was only OBG. I'll get to it later. All right, thank you. Bye-bye. I'll get to it later. I got other stuff to do today. I want to do that because I've had this sore throat thing. It's one of the reasons. I got to get all my material, my pictures, and all my studies for the last 4 or 5 years. All I'm saying is there's a possibility that during the time he was breaking up with Diane Edwards, Diane Marie Jean Edwards, Debbie's name is Diane Hogue. Her sister's name is Jeannie. And I'm going to tell you, I've looked at both people. Jeannie looked like a young, long-haired Elizabeth Taylor with a little bit of Rita Moreno and Audrey Hepburn mixed. She had a farm girl face, but she also had that dark mascara look at eyes. You know what I'm saying? Like Elizabeth Taylor. And I'll go into that a little further about her and her mom, who played at the Heart of Jacksonville, played the organ there, and the roller derm, and my research on next door. There's another aspect of this, and I don't understand for the life of me. I say, well, maybe they do have mental illness, and we don't want to torture the people that are already tortured. I understand that. But I'm a human being with a criminal justice degree, and there were other murders in 74 that quite possibly were him. And I'll show how I think he did that, too. All right, thank you.